Here.
Mrs. Dorn is absent. Mr. Kinsey?
Present.
Mr. Price?
Here.
Mrs. Sloughman?
Here.
All right, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. The flag is right there in the back in front. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, Mr. Liming, would you please go through the treasurer's report?
Okay, can I get a motion to approve the minutes from the special meeting held June 8th and also the meetings held June 10th and June 30th?
So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Sloughman and Mr. Price. Any questions or corrections to the minutes from those three meetings? All right, Mr. Liming, please call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter?
Yes.
Mr. Kinsey?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mrs. Sloughman?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Could I get a motion to approve the treasurer's report for the month ending June 30th, 2021?
Motion to accept.
Mr. Kinsey,
Second.
Mrs. Sloughman.
Just a few things. This is the report that is the end of our fiscal year. So it's the one that we use to file many of the state and federal reports that are due this time of year. If we could look at the blue copy in the agenda, and the report also is on the screen there, so you can see that in, I think it's the first page, if I got the right report. Yes, first page in the blue section for board members. Obviously, many bad things were due to the COVID situation. One of the good things, financially at least, was that we did get two grants. Those grants allowed us to receive more money into the general fund than we had budgeted as of June 30th, 2020. So the column on the left is what was budgeted June 30, 2020 in revenue at the top, expenditures at the bottom. And then the second column is the actual revenue and actual expenditures. So you do want the revenues in a good situation to be over the 100%, and you want the expenditures obviously to be less than 100%. So we came out really well. I don't think I've ever had this happen before. So that's one of the very few good situations that came out of last year for us. So then toward the end of the report, I mentioned this the last meeting, at the special meeting, that would have the pie charts to show the in layman's form what was spent and received for the year. And I just wanted to say that from those numbers that are up there now, let's start with revenue first. It's kind of a very typical year. We received about 28% of our funding from state and federal sources. So we've talked about over the years where we get 27% from the state. This year it's maybe 26 state and 2 federal. I don't know the exact there, but 28 total from state and federal sources, and then the remaining 72% from local sources. The big chunk, of course, is real estate property taxes. And as I've said many times, we are one of those districts that is very lopsided, where our local funding is much more than our state and federal funding, due to property values and a number of other demographics that the state has deemed necessary to cut our state funding. So that's the revenue. And on the expenditure side, we finished with salaries and benefits at about 80% of our budget. That's typical for school district. And we've been a little below that in years past, but that's pretty much where we normally are in that one too. So there weren't any surprises in the percentages of expenditures and revenue for the year. Any questions on anything I've got here on these or any other reports I've included?
Well, some of the, when you mentioned earlier, some of the outlay items that we had were less than 100%, like supplies and materials and capital outlay and so forth. That tends to make those portions of the expenditures smaller, and the percentage then of the salary and benefits bigger. So it probably isn't too different. It's just that it's percentages.
It's always
Inflate.
important. It's always important when you look at a pie chart. If a percentage such as salaries and benefits goes up, it doesn't necessarily mean salaries and benefits went up. It could mean that the remainder of the pie chart went down.
Right.
So that's what happened 2021.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments? All right, Mr. Landing, please call the roll.
Mr. Kinsey,
Yes.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Mrs. Sloughman,
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter.
Yes, motion passes. All right, the next section is correspondence. As board, I know that we received a variety. I know that I received a variety of items, mostly related to diversity and inclusion. Some very well thought out opinions and perspectives expressed. John Miller, Meredith Brinegar, Summer Pockman, Diana Presnell, in particular, are ones I have copies of. And I know that we've had some discussion in the past about diversity and inclusion, equity, and that we have an initiative as a district to begin more of a process of working through that. I know that that's been on the radar for a while, and that I've asked Dr. Kozad for us to get a full report on where that committee is at our next board meeting, because this is such a, well, hot topic, or at least a high interest topic for us as a district. So do you want to comment on that at all first, or do you want to wait for that till later in the meeting?
I can comment on now. So again, I think that part of that group is part of the strategic plan that we've been working on, and we continue to refine our strategic plan. It started in 2017. We revised it again in 2019. And again, those plans and initiatives were somewhat sidetracked by COVID and the financial issues and focus of the school district on getting tax levy, passed.
Sure.
And so forth. So had a grassroots group meeting over the past year and so forth of trying to study and get more informed, smarter about this topic, and so trying to see where that leads us. And again, I can provide more information on that at the next board meeting if we want to talk about the strategic plan.
Yes.
At a high level also to be included in that conversation. I'll be more than happy to do that in the August board meeting. Again, like I said, that strategic plan has gone through a couple of revisions. It's streamlined. I think at the beginning, 3 or 4 years ago, extremely ambitious, and we continue to work on things. We continue to either pare down things or push things together. Again, this particular topic, very complex topic, very high interest topic, and very important topic. Want to make sure that we have information and are informed about, again, as an educational entity here, making sure that we're lifelong learners and making sure that we're staying on top of things and making educated, informed decisions. So I'd be more happy to do that at the next board meeting, or I think it's next board meeting rather than, we do have 2 board meetings in August.
True.
But
Or the next
we can
one.
definitely do it at the August 12th. I believe it's August 12th.
Yeah.
We can definitely do that. Okay.
Just curious for my own information, have previous boards or previous board members, to what extent have they been involved with the work that's done thus far?
We presented the strategic plan to the board in 2019. That's the last time there was a revision. Previously, I'm not sure at what level the board was involved in the actual strategic planning pieces of it.
Gotcha.
So I can definitely look into that.
Cool. Well, it sounds like there's been a lot of work. I want to
Yep.
thank the people for the legwork thus far. I think we look forward to seeing the details so we can help in the initiative.
Yep. We can definitely do that next time.
There was any other board members want to further comment on any of those on that topic from letters? And I'd be happy to make copies of the letters that we received available to folks if you're interested in reviewing them, because really they're very thoughtful and very well presented to us. So,
if you don't mind,
Go ahead,
actually,
go ahead.
yeah. So on that topic, I just in the interest of transparency, I came prepared just to read one of the replies that I made to all the letters. Were very thoughtful, very respectful, very professional, just as you said. But I want to read a response to one of the correspondents. So this individual wrote 2 separate letters, one on the topic of diversity, inclusion, and equity, and the other specifically about critical race theory. So I said, good morning, and I'm just going to read this verbatim, forgive me. Good morning, I want to thank you for making your views known. I sincerely appreciate the obvious time and care you took in crafting and sharing your thoughts. I hope you will not mind that I'm combining my response to your 2 communications here. Diversity and inclusion are critical to the health of our schools, as well as our culture at large. I would like to join you in any effort to seek out and eradicate any rule or policy within Bellbrook-Sugarcreek schools that discriminates against, provides advantage to, or prejudges any individual based on immutable characteristics such as race. Please bring any such rule or policy to my attention, and I promise to do everything possible to nullify it so that every student, regardless of their skin color, will be treated with kindness and compassion and provided an equal opportunity to flourish and succeed in their school. I'm very familiar with critical race theory and similar concepts. They hold core beliefs that differ from my goals stated above. For example, critical race theory requires the adoption of the racist belief that all members of one race are oppressors of other races, not because of any individual racist thought or action, only because of the color of their skin. Merriam-Webster defines racism as, quote here, a belief that race is a fundamental determinant of human traits and capacities, and that racial differences produce an inherent superiority of a particular race, end quote. I go on to say, racism in any form should never be endorsed in our school system. Thank you again for making your views known, and I heartily welcome any opportunity for us to work together on shared goals. Respectfully, Mike Kinsey.
Anything else?
Yes, I received, like the other board members, a number of emails, and again, very appreciative of those. And again, they were very well expressed and respectful. And as always, we need to be open and also communicative with our community and allow the expression of alternative views that may not align with our board members. We need to hear, from the community, know what their interests are. So, David, most of your discussion was about diversity and inclusion. Mike, you touched a little bit on the CRT concern, but I guess specifically what was the content of some of those emails, with which I do want to respond to, was in particular with reference to House Bill 322 and House Bill 327. So this is going to get a little bit long, but I think it's important. And I know there's an interest from the community to know where board members may stand on a particular position or topic in our community, or our nation for that matter. So I will read this, and I think it's important. It's food for thought, and certainly should be. One of the things we hear a cry for is open and frank discussion, and I think this is an example of an attempt to do that. So I wrote this out because it's kind of, rather than me just talking ad lib and using a lot of buts and uhs, I figure I would just write it out. So here we go. So bear with me. This will take a little bit of time. I received a number of emails regarding House Bill 322 and House Bill 327. I wish time would allow me to read each of the emails in their entirety, along with my responses in their entirety. I will use some quotes from their emails, which I feel capture their points of view and concerns, along with some selective responses from me. From Denise Moore. I am writing to you regarding Ohio House Bills 322 and 327, which represent a serious threat to the students in our school district in terms of their capacity to understand racism and discrimination in our society and its historical antecedents. To be sure, these bills are an overreach of regulation in curriculum and instruction at the local level. Their aim is to silence discussion while perpetuating inaccurate accounts of U.S. history. And please keep in mind I had to do selective, so some of the transitions may not blend perfectly here, but I'm just trying to grab, I tried to grab the highlights from each person's email to me. I think it was largely sent to all the school board members as well. From Diana Presnell, witnessing the murder of George Floyd and the subsequent flood of information that began spreading online regarding the subject of race in this country presented us with a puzzle. How much of it was accurate? Where was all this information coming from? And if it was true, why hadn't we heard of any of it before? So we began to dig into the history of this country with a vigor reminiscent of the intensity that we applied to learning about how Ohio school funding works. We discovered a veritable mountain of facts regarding the founding and subsequent development of the United States that we'd never been privy to before. Very few people alive in today's society are directly responsible for the creation of an institution of the rules that have governed the formation of this country over the last 2 centuries. However, those rules and perceptions continue to haunt our daily lives today, if for no other reason that we are all prevented from knowing they existed in the first place. House Bill 327 is built around the term divisive concept, which by its very nature is an eye of the beholder kind of phrase. Without a clear and defined statement of what exactly constitutes a divisive concept under House Bill 327, it can be applied to many topics. For example, a teacher trying to answer the question, what is a vaccine, could be considered by some as divisive. Are House Bill 322 and House Bill 327 going to lead to books being banned because all interpretations of the material must be considered from the perspective of all students, parents, and faculty in order for a book to be considered safe to read? From Meredith Glick-Brinegar, it seems that Ohio House Bills 322 and 327 are an attempt to stifle dialogue about race in general. They are an overreach of regulation on curriculum and instruction. They serve to not only destroy discussion, they also perpetuate inaccuracies of our nation's history. Our school's U.S. history curriculum should include a truthful, thorough, and authentic representation of U.S. history. These bills will no doubt intensify a national divide that currently exists. Many school districts, including Columbus City Schools, have taken a stance against House Bill 322 and 327, and we hope you will as well. Again, I did my best to grab representative lines from each of those emails, and once again, I'm grateful and thankful for having received those. What follows is representative of my responses to these community members, along with additional thoughts on this matter. Please note that my responses are a reflection of my own views and should not be interpreted as a response from the Bellbrook-Sugarcreek School Board. So this is me talking to them. My take on House Bill 322 and House Bill 327 is that they are not intended to prevent discussion on controversial matters or the teaching of any facts related to our history. Rather, they seem to make a very clear allowance for discussion across the full breadth of ideas, as well as for instruction on any historical event. Please take note of the following text from House Bill 327, lines 541 to 545. Nothing in this section shall be construed to prohibit discussing or using supplemental instructional materials as part of a larger course of academic instruction or training to teach divisive concepts in an objective manner without endorsement. Again, nothing shall be construed to prohibit that. The bills do seem intended to oppose the endorsement of racism of any kind and the distortion of history to fit an ideology that would undermine our nation and its founding principles as provided in the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights. I believe House Bill 322 and House Bill 327 are intended to protect against the endorsement, repeat endorsement of extremist views, not their discussion. There's been much talk in the news and social media about critical race theory, and again, Mike, thank you for the discussion on that tonight earlier. I personally am not aware of CRT being taught as a formalized curriculum in any K-12 school system in our country. However, elements and aspects of it are being taught, as evidenced by the use of the 1619 project curricula in classrooms throughout the nation. And I'll explain a little later a little more about the 1619 project in case people here are not aware. The recent Columbus City Schools joint statement on House Bill 322 and House Bill 327 stated that the aim of the bills is to perpetuate an inaccurate understanding of our history. I completely disagree with that broad, unsubstantiated statement. I am not supportive of a rewrite or a reinterpretation of U.S. history that is not backed by facts and peer review from well-established historians. The New York Times 1619 project, adopted into the classroom in many schools in our nation, appears to be an attempt to rewrite our history to fit an ideology. One of the central tenets of the 1619 project is that the very origin of the United States was 1619, when African slaves were brought to Jamestown. Further, the 1619 project asserts that preservation of slavery was one of the critical reasons for the Revolutionary War. Those assertions are neither supported by facts nor by established historians. Factually and objectively, the Declaration of Independence is the defining moment in the founding of our nation. The Revolutionary War was fought to free our nation from British tyranny. To endorse, and to underscore that word, to endorse otherwise is clearly an attempt to shape history to an ideology. I find it entirely appropriate, especially during this time of heightened racial tensions, that the state would provide legislative guidance such as the following found in House Bill 322, actual words from House Bill 322. No state agency, school district, or school shall teach that one race or sex is inherently superior to another race or sex. 2, an individual, by virtue of that individual's race or sex, is inherently racist, sexist, or oppressive, whether consciously or unconsciously. I'm in full agreement that factual history, favorable and unfavorable, can, should, and frankly must be taught in an objective manner to our students. In my own personal experience, educational experience, I have never encountered a time when the teaching of facts was prohibited. We live in the United States of America. Further, as I would say there, we live in the freest of free countries with near immediate access to the entirety of human knowledge at our fingertips through the internet. More relevant to this discussion, the teaching of facts is not currently prohibited in the Bellbrook-Sugarcreek school system, and neither would it be if House Bill 322 and House Bill 327 were to pass. As I read them, and I have, the bills are intended to prevent the endorsement of radical racist and sexist views of any kind in the state school systems. You, and I say you, each of the person that wrote to me, I said, you mentioned a number of historical events related to racial injustice that you were not taught in school. I do not accept that in the Bellbrook-Sugarcreek school system that any of these events and subjects are considered off limits. Our children are taught the reality of our nation's past, and any and all of the history you referenced is open for discussion and investigation. Time constraints, though, limit how much can be taught on any given subject. Everything does not need to be taught for the harsh reality of our nation's past with respect to slavery and racism to be known and understood by our children. There were suggestions about curriculum and not allowing state involvement and things like that, and to that I responded that there is already state guidance with respect to standards and curriculum. And then I went on to say, I would recommend, if you would like a change, that you work with the State Board of Education to address areas where you believe guidance comes up short in matters of history related to race. The process for the revision is described very well on the Ohio Department of Education's website. And kind of consistent with what you said just a moment ago, Mike, if you are aware of any policy, practice, or action within the Bellbrook-Sugarcreek school system that is in any way racist or sexist, that has or could result in unfair treatment or diminished opportunity for any student or employee, please let me know. As a board member, that is something I can and will work to change. So the general gist, of the emails was, would I support, a statement or a resolution against House Bills 322 and 327? The answer is absolutely not. If anything, I would, based on what I just read you, actually be for a resolution endorsing these bills for the reasons I outlined in what I just read. So those are my comments on the matter. So
Anything else on that topic in correspondence? Okay, I also did, and we do have a policy on controversial issues, and I would encourage you to read it.
David, if you would, actually, Josh can actually project that.
Oh,
Yeah, I asked him to have that ready. So
Okay,
if folks
there it
will
is.
take a couple minutes and read that, they can see what the policy of the school
The
district is.
first portion of it, I think, is probably the most important. The Board of Education believes that consideration of controversial issues has a legitimate place in the instructional program of the schools. Properly introduced and conducted, the consideration of such issues can help students learn to identify important issues, explore fully and fairly all sides of an issue, weigh carefully the values and factors involved, and develop techniques for formulating and evaluating positions. The board will permit the introduction and proper educational use of controversial issues, provided that their use in the instructional program, A, does not tend to indoctrinate or persuade students to a particular point of view, and B, it encourages open-mindedness and is conducted in a spirit of scholarly inquiry. Controversial issues related to the program may be initiated by the students themselves, provided they are presented in the ordinary course of classroom instruction and is not substantially disruptive to the educational setting. And then there's more details on how that operationally is in place. But I would encourage you to read that.
I support that policy. I think there's a lot of wisdom in it, that all issues, everything should always in an educational setting be allowed to be discussed impartially and objectively, however, without endorsement or indoctrination or persuasion.
And that was the gist of my response was, as I understood the emails from these three people, there was an inference or maybe an overt statement that discussion could not take place. And I think it's very evident from close reading of these bills and further how we would apply those here in our district that we are for discussion of any topic. If you want to debate whether 1619 was the founding of this nation, it's a free topic for discussion in the classroom. But if it's an endorsement, absolutely not. And that aligns with our policy of persuasion or indoctrination. As far as facts or thoughts, ideas, they have to be on the table. They have to be on the table. And so I think it's important to focus on the reality of what these particular bills say, or what some may assume that we have it hold as opinions or whatnot and values. But to be very clear, I am totally for open discussion of any subject in the universe, but I oppose the endorsement, indoctrination, attempts to persuade to a certain worldview, especially if it involves the distortion of history or the misinterpretation of history as has been established and accepted broadly through peer reviews and whatnot. So.
Any other comment on this topic? Okay. Another letter of correspondence had to do with masks and the whether, particularly I guess in the elementary school arena where there isn't a vaccine yet. And at this point, we are working with our local Greene County Public Health, the Ohio Department of Health, to make sure that we are compliant with regulations associated with that. And again, this is not a board opinion, but this is my opinion. If you haven't been vaccinated, I encourage you to get vaccinated. And the same with your children as soon as they are eligible. Anybody comment on masks? Okay. And then another comment on busing with a family who does struggle with the busing scenario. So I know that that's still a topic that is being addressed and worked. And then differently, but not completely differently, I got a letter from the Jewish Community Relations Council with information about the Jewish holidays throughout the year. I'll pass these out so you can have a copy of it, so that we can, from their perspective, hopefully pay attention to some of these key holy days from the Jewish perspective, and make sure that we try not to schedule things when some of our Jewish students may really be obligated to other activities, particularly with Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Passover. So if anybody would like to get a copy of that, I'd be happy to provide that for them as well. So as we look at our calendars for future years, we can take a look at that, make sure that we are, again, being inclusive of the needs of our students. That was it on the topics that I was aware of for correspondence. Is there anything else that we want to bring forward from correspondence? All right, let me get that. Let's just, that is next, isn't it? With the communication next. All right, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 folks signed up to speak. We do have 15 minutes per topic. But our first one is Cassie Kipling to talk about busing.
I actually have something else to read you.
Oh, okay. Thank you. You can share.
Thank you.
Good evening. I first brought my concerns to the board 3 months ago to advocate for more busing in the district. At that meeting, the board seemed willing to investigate further the possibility of bringing back some level of busing should the levy pass, especially in the non-walkable areas of the exclusion zone. Fast forward to today, and we are in a very different financial position than we were 3 months ago. In April, we were facing a potential 5-year forecast with roughly an $8 million deficit. But today, we're now, thanks to some creative thinking and renegotiating of business benefits, we're looking at a surplus of just shy of $11.7 million in 2025. This is close to a $20 million swing. We are no longer in the same position we were 3 months ago, and it's time to face the fact that the community needs more busing for our students. I realize there are logistical hurdles to bringing back more busing. We need more drivers, and those drivers need to take time to get trained. But what exactly is the administration doing to recruit more drivers? I looked at the school employment page, which is what I just gave you, and there is no listing for bus drivers on the employment page. After speaking with the director of transportation, there is an Indeed ad out there, and there is a small sign about the size of a child in front of this building. It's not good enough. We need to start thinking outside the box. A small sign and an Indeed posting are not going to do it. It's time we use some of that out-of-the-box thinking to figure out a way to find more drivers. It is time that the administration shows the community that their concerns are being heard. There are several traffic flow problems areas in large to the lack of busing to large parts of the community. The more kids we're able to place on buses, the more we'll be able to reduce the amount of parents rushing to pick up their kids at 2:50 in the afternoon, which currently creates a dangerous situation for those students walking home. I understand that there will be a change in the traffic flow pattern at BCI, and this may help some, but the reality is there are too many parents attempting to pick up their kids due to a lack of busing. The first time I spoke to you, I was addressing the walkability of various parts of the exclusion zone. Upon talking with many parents in the community, there are a large number of high school students outside this exclusion zone that lack busing and are really struggling to find a safe means to get to school. Through my survey, I was made aware of several issues facing high school students, including no older siblings, a backlog for acquiring driver's license, as well as a limit of one non-family member in a vehicle for their first year of driving. This creates a huge need for working parents trying to get their kids to school. Are there enough parking places to even accommodate these kids at the high school? I applaud the fact the administration took time to send the parents a survey, but we need to ensure proper questions are being asked. The survey attempted to determine what level of increase we may have on busing next year as BOA students return to the classroom, but it failed to really look at the true needs of the community. I am advocating to bring back busing to everyone that lives at least a mile or more from the school. Ideally, the following questions need to be asked the community to determine a true need. What level of difficulty will it be next year if you reside in the exclusion zone or high school to get to school? Will you reside in the exclusion zone next year because you changed schools? So you're going from BCI or from Stephen Bell to BCI, or going from the middle school to the high school? Do you no longer have busing? How many miles do you live from the school? Is it 0 to 0.5, 0.5 to 1, 1 to 2, or more than 2? If you're not using busing, does your child attend a before or after school program if you're in K through 6, or does your student drive to school if they're in high school? We are no longer in financial trouble, so we should no longer be providing the state minimum service to these students. The community voted to fund this levy, and it's important to listen to the community regarding their need for busing. At this time, I would like to know each of the board member stances for bringing back some level of busing by second semester of this school year. Thank you.
Mrs. Kipling, I had a couple questions for you. Thank you so much, very thorough. Are you confident that the parents want the money appropriated for this?
I am willing to go out and get a petition signed if that's what it takes.
Okay. Yeah, a percentage of the parents would help a lot. This is the community's money, specifically the parents. If that's how they want it spent, we need to know that.
I got over 25 responses from mostly high school parents in the matter of hours yesterday when I put out this request to the community. So, and most of them were saying, we have no way to get our kids to school, can't ride with somebody else, and both parents work.
In a matter of hours during a work day.
And the matter of hours during a work day even, yeah.
Correct. And yes, I am concerned about out in front here. It is a dangerous situation.
It is.
Yeah, thank you very much. I know you've been raising this issue for a while now. I really appreciate you coming and giving us such good information. You asked for comments. I don't mind making a few comments. I think first and foremost, we really do need to keep a laser eye on our budget. We need to make sure that we're not overextending ourselves. The community granted us permission with the new levy. We need to be good stewards of that. But with that being said, when goods or services need provided, we should provide them if there is a need. I know due to the recent negotiations in regards to health benefits, I think there's savings of $4.3 million over the next 5 years. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think the numbers that I've heard, if we were to restore full busing, 100%, is something about $200,000, $230,000, something like that. I heard that somewhere.
Busing is, but
and so, maybe not, but at minimum, I think you raised a great point of, the early rationale was especially what students can walk. Well, I know for a fact that there's students who live on a road with no sidewalk.
Sure.
So I think at minimum, something can be done.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. All right. I'm going to stick with the same topic. So Tiffany, Michelle, or Mitchell?
Mitchell.
Thank you, sorry.
It's pretty much what she said. We're on South Alpha Bellbrook Road and there's no sidewalks.
Yeah.
We're 1.8 miles out. So last year we watched the bus go by the house to pick up the kids that were 2 miles out. They go back by the house again and we don't have sidewalks. There's nothing we can do. So yeah, she pretty much covered it all.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll count that as an endorsement.
Yeah, exactly.
Back on schedule, right?
So okay, that appears to be it for busing.
Maybe I would like for us to not limit. Does it care enough to come out tonight, prepare a statement? I don't want to limit us to 15 minutes on any topic.
Sure.
So
No.
we need to hear from people that have come out tonight.
And then Nicole, Sam, thank you. It says staff.
Yeah,
So.
I'll elaborate.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
I had a prepared statement made, but I'm gonna change it a little bit. So
Okay.
sorry. So I've had 3 children in the district. I have a daughter who was a recent graduate in 2020. I have a upcoming 7th grader and 5th grader in the district. And
Nice.
specifically when we came to Bellbrook, we moved here because of the good school district, the good schools. And we've had a very enjoyable time over the years being involved in Bellbrook schools. And, you know, just in light of the things that have happened in our country, we have a lot of conversations at home about diversity and race. And it's actually funny because I can relate to my kids walking into this room now. I get so emotional talking about this just because of them. I don't know how many of you have actually walked in a room and been the only minority in a room. And that topic has come up with my children in terms of staff. They don't have teachers that look like them. And as we all see in our community, it's changed a lot. For those of you who have been here most of your lives, we've been here since 2010. You know, the student body looks very different than it did even since 2010. And so, you know, in terms of speaking about, you know, diversity, and I know it's a big subject, and I know it's going to get brought up in our meeting today, you know, I really am asking the board and the administration to do what you can to diversify your staff. I mean, research shows that children do better when they're around people or have mentors or leaders that look like them, that can relate to them from a, you know, diversity perspective. And it's just been very discouraging to be in the district this long, and our staff is not racially diverse at all. That's very concerning, especially when the student population has changed the way that it has. I think that you would have less, maybe some behavioral issues if some of these children could go to, you know, people that they trusted that were like them, and maybe have somebody to talk to that can relate to them. I have spoken with Dr. Kozad about that, and thank you. And I will say, in the short year it's been since we had a conversation, I've heard that some things are turning and changing, and I appreciate that. You know, I don't know if you want to take a look at Centerville's plan. They've done a really great job on social media of trying to recruit diverse teachers out of college, from other schools. And I think a lot of it starts in their strategic plan for their school district and their vision. And the fact that they have adopted diversity language into their vision and their strategy for their district. We haven't. It's not anywhere to be found on a website. And I think if Bellbrook wants to think of itself as being progressive and forward and a leader, why haven't we done that? So those are just some things that I would, you know, like to bring to your attention. And, you know, I have a couple future graduates. I'd like to see some change. I didn't really see any with my last one, so I'm really hopeful that the next two, you know, they'll see a very different staff by the time they graduate. I know it's hard. I get it. It's not easy. And I'm not asking you to go out and just find people. I want them to be qualified, right? But
Sure.
I think that there are the means to do that. So, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. All right, John Miller for Diversity Committee.
This kind of ties in a little bit. Thank you all for what you've said thus far in regards to wanting to do something, as Nicole just mentioned. So there were a couple things that came out last summer. One was an email from Dr. Kozad, and one was a resolution from the Ohio State Board of Education titled "A Resolution to Condemn Racism and to Advance Equity and Opportunity for Black Students, Indigenous Students, and Students of Color." So Dr. Kozad stated, "We know that our students in our schools carrying an assortment of beliefs regarding race, culture, religion, and lifestyles," just came up with the Jewish organization that you mentioned, "make it a priority to support all of our students to ensure that everyone is treated with respect and dignity. We are committed to promoting a positive culture that respects differences, tolerance, and inclusion of all people. Next year, we will be providing training around diversity, equity, cultural competency, and inclusive practices for our staff and students. Additionally, we will be forming a committee that examines and addresses these complex societal issues. As a society listening and learning from each other, we will continue to move forward for the betterment of all. Very nice. The State Board of Education resolution included the following. Quote, as our nation grapples with the hard truths of racism and inequality, we are listening with broken hearts and engaging with determined spirits. We acknowledge that Ohio's education system has not been immune to these problems, and while we earnestly strive to correct them, we have a great deal of work left. Whereas the State Board of Education believes that public schools are fundamental to our democratic society, and we must be dedicated to equity and thoughtful teaching of future citizens that racism, bigotry, and hatred have no place. And whereas the path to equity begins with a deep understanding of the history of inequalities and inhumanity and how they have come to impact current society. Further resolved that the State Board of Education strongly recommends that all Ohio school districts begin a reflection and internal examination of their own involving all members of their school community to examine all facets of the school's operations, with a special emphasis on curriculum, hiring practices, staff development practices, student discipline, e.g. suspension and expulsion, and be it further resolved that the State Board of Education directs the Ohio Department of Education to provide support for school districts' reflection and internal examination, including identifying and sharing curricular models and resources, promoting sessions to allow districts to share and collaborate on their actions, and to share progress in implementing these changes. Regarding the current State Board of Education strategic plan, Each Child, Our Future, all of this is available online, readily available, Googleable. The resolution goes on to state, quote, equity is our plan's greatest imperative and #1 principle. And the state's education system is not effectively meeting the needs of specific groups of students, such as African American, Hispanic, English learners, economically disadvantaged, and students with disabilities. I believe that it is imperative that Dr. Kozad and the school board make good on the statements above and follow the lead of the state DOE resolution, looping in parents, teachers, administrators, local organizations, and anyone in the community who can positively contribute by making our district more equitable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Denise Moore. Oh, and Denise, we had a letter from you too, and I didn't mention that. I apologize.
That's okay. That's okay. Thank you. Appreciate your previous comments, and it's an important subject. And thank you for allowing us to speak. I'm here on behalf of Sugar Creek Cares. We're a local organization, citizen-driven, volunteer organization. We have about 152 members. We're all volunteers. Few conversations in America are as important as the ones surrounding diversity, equity, and inclusion, or what we call DEI. Today, how we educate our students and how our school deals systemically with DEI has never been more important. You may ask, why is DEI so important? It's important because it shapes our students' ability to function in a racially, culturally, ethnically diverse nation and beyond. Our graduates' capacity for understanding how to function in the world today is much different than in the past. As a school district, we must take steps that promote our students and our school staff's ability to function and not restrict their ability to understand and engage with diversity-related issues simply because some aspects of these issues make some people uncomfortable. As a 97% white, economically affluent community, we have a responsibility to ensure our school is equitable and inclusive, and the school is developing those values in our graduates. We are curious why our school has not kept pace with the adjacent, predominantly white affluent communities such as Centerville or Oakwood in developing a diversity strategy that connects to the school's strategic plan. When we search our school's strategic plan, we cannot find the word diversity printed in any of the 40 pages. Further, there is no diversity plan at all that can be accessed. When we look at the school board's landing page, we do find one and only one reference to the word diverse, but it is not related to the concepts of DEI that we seek here. On the board's vision page, there are 6 beliefs listed. Belief 5 refers to valuing student differences to reach them as individual learners. Belief 6 refers to students are challenged by a curriculum that responds to the changing needs of society. We could suppose, I guess, that 2 belief statements might be related to DEI. Not sure. It's not clearly articulated. Are these beliefs outcomes that that have metrics that are associated with tracking their achievement? I can't tell. The Ohio School Board Association has compiled resources to help districts with conducting critical conversations on diversity and equity issues. There are numerous examples beyond OSBA on how to go about creating DEI plans. Clearly, given today's social climate, the Bellbrook-Sugarcreek School Board should immediately launch a comprehensive diversity plan with actions focused around student learning, staff development, and the entire school systems of operation. We hope the board will accelerate actions related to this request. We are available to help. We want to help. Please call us if you need help. We're happy to help.
Okay,
Sugar Creek cares.
thank you very much. I'm not sure I can pronounce the last name correctly. Aaron Friel? Friel, sorry.
That's okay, not a problem at all. My husband kind of expressed our joint sentiments, and I was asked to read a letter on behalf of Summer Packman, if that's okay.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Summer says, "Dear board members and Mr. Kozad, my name is Summer Packman. I'm a resident of Sugar Creek Township with 3 school-aged children. My great-grandparents moved here almost 80 years ago and created a homestead that was the foundation of many of my best childhood memories. When you love someone or something so much, it's harder to see its weaknesses. However, last summer's events in Minneapolis and nationwide shone a light on our country's continuing racial injustice. I started to understand how Black, Indigenous, and people of color experience the country very differently than I do as a white person. And I realized that the deficits here in Bellbrook-Sugarcreek include a lack of diversity and a resistance to welcoming people of all races into our community. I write this letter with urgency. I'm encouraging you to prepare our children to thrive in the increasingly diverse world. Bellbrook-Sugarcreek is not keeping stride with the rest of the country's progress toward racial equity and inclusion. This means our school district must work harder to educate our children about diversity. I support a school board that leads with diversity, equity, and inclusion at the forefront of its vision, a school district strategic plan that includes objectives on diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, a robust educational curriculum that includes authors from all perspectives and history lessons taught without the whitewashing of facts. These 3 changes can go a long way towards building empathy and compassion in our children that is sorely needed in these highly polarized times. The Bellbrook-Sugarcreek School District has an opportunity to develop its students into inclusive leaders of compassion and justice, the type of leaders that can bring together people and lead them into a more prosperous future. Bellbrook-Sugarcreek School District has the capability to do this. Thank you.
Right. Well, thank you. And that was the same correspondence, I think, that we got.
Right.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't take notes because I thought I had it. I just want to make sure. Diana, personnel. I think we'll go to the same topic then. And Josh will be next?
Yes.
Okay.
Probably should have gone in a different direction, actually.
Either direction is fine. Thank you very much.
I have an extra if you'd like.
And I do apologize. The final page of that packet I was going to use as part of a quote, and then I realized the point I was making required a different quote. So it is the page and the port of the website it is from have been written into yours so that you have the ability to research and verify that I'm not making this up. In the 1950s, Southern leaders fought school integration. This is history that cannot be disputed. Our historical research led us to a book first published in 1969 called The Rise of Massive Resistance. It's what is on the top there. I'm going to read you quotes from the page I have provided each of you. The NAACP and its allies were unconcerned with the welfare of Black citizens, Cook asserted. They had simply seized the racial issue as a convenient front for their more nefarious activities and as one with which they could dupe naive do-gooders, fuzzy-minded intellectuals, misguided clergymen, and radical journalists to be their pawns. Below that, you can read, the Citizens Council explained in a story beneath the headline, Anti-White Plot Hatched in Moscow, that the integration movement is the offshoot of a diabolical plot hatched in Soviet Russia by communists nearly 3 decades ago. Now, included in the packet you were handed are screenshots from the conservative think tank responsible for the template that House Bill 322 and 327 are both modeled after. There are parts of both bills that are verbatim the kit that the, Citizens for Renewing America have put out for districts. Notice the red hammer and sickle in that banner image. Clearly, Russia is once again being used to install fear. Let's read from the bottom paragraph. It is no coincidence, therefore, that nearly all of these institutions or systems mirror Marxism's alleged culprits. It's discussing the concepts it defines as CRT. If you flip to the back page, so again, as I said, the quote is here. They did activism while no one else was watching, and they conscripted or recruited seemingly respectable, moderate-sounding professionals to do their bidding by teaching them, reaching out and messaging to them, and making a politically correct version of CRT fashionable. This double-barreled approach then gave them the ability to infiltrate the highest echelons of business, government, and the military-industrial complex by getting woke corporations, law firms already predisposed to CRT wokeism, and even the military. This expansion of the CRT message and following has been alarming and will ruin our nation permanently unless we stop it right away in our schools and colleges. Why does the language and positions being touted on this website, so the one that's based 322 and 327 are based on, sound similar to the Southern states' opposition 70 years ago to integration, which I'm sure we can all agree was extremely racist, if these bills are in fact supposed to be anti-racist? As board members responsible for the safety and well-being of every child that attends this school, I hope that this knowledge gives you further reason to consider opposing House Bill 322 and 327, while embracing a plan to make sure this district truly represents and cares for all students.
Over the last several weeks, there's been a lot of news about critical race theory and teaching divisive concepts. When Michael posted the text of the House Bills 322 and 327, we started researching the language used in both proposed laws. It sounded extremely familiar. That's because it's the exact same language as laws being proposed in nearly 24 other states in the last several months. When that kind of similarity across proposals in any group of governments exists, we start to wonder who is pushing an agenda and what that agenda is. Is this benevolent state guidance on reducing division in our communities, or is there broader motivations at play? After some additional digging, we located Citizens for Renewing America, the extreme right-wing think tank that produced a legal template now almost verbatim across our country, and codified in Ohio as House Bill 322 and 327, along with documentation on how they feel this legal language will forward their mission to allow parents to remove productive discussion of diversity and inclusion across our nation, regardless of school policies. I urge you all to take a deeper look at the rest of this organization's website and decide for yourselves what their purpose in helping these laws get passed in our communities is. As we've already seen with House Bill 920 and the challenges it has placed on our school funding situation, it is possible for even well-intended laws to have deep and unforeseen consequences, let alone laws that may have been written with specific motivations in mind. In summary, we believe that before accepting at face value that the laws proposed by our state are meant to reduce division in our communities, we should consider who's proposing the laws themselves and why. We should consider why the group that is working to pass these laws uses the same language of fear and division that politicians previously used to prevent Black children from attending the same schools as white children. We should carefully consider the resolutions already published by our sister communities in Cleveland and Columbus, who have a far deeper experience with diversity and inclusion than we in small town Bellbrook do. If Bellbrook is truly committed to equality, diversity, and inclusion in our schools and in this community, we should join them in supporting our students with strategic plans that reflect this, while opposing laws that are written with the same divisive and fear-mongering tactics used to fight against integration.
Dana Hoskins. Thank you.
Yes, as I read recently in the Bridges newsletter communication, that masks will be optional for students and staff. My concern is that for the students who do not have the option to be vaccinated yet, I think they are still at risk of exposure to COVID-19 and the unforeseen impacts that might have even in the future for their personal health. I'm proposing for consideration that masks be required until vaccinations could be optional for students in the school, and sometime, the 2 weeks or however, some reasonable amount of time for immunity and distribution for people to choose whether or not they want to opt into that. And that is my concern presented before the board today. And I look forward to seeing how that develops in the future and what the community's opinion of that is as well.
Thank you very much. I know that the staff at all of the buildings has had opportunity to get the vaccine. Excuse me. I'm not sure exactly what the percentage is, but it seemed like it was very high based on the.
It was nearing 70% of the vaccination opportunity that they had back in March.
Okay.
So my assumption is it would be even higher since then.
Okay.
The real issue is below 12 or below 12.
It's
correct?
below 12.
Right.
That's right. And there is expectation that there is soon to be a vaccine available for 5 and up, and it's probably the Pfizer. That's probably the one that's going to be approved first. But there isn't any real target date established yet at this point in time. But certainly, in the work that I do, that's a topic that is frequently discussed, so we don't know for sure just yet, but there is even speculation that it will be available before September. So we are hoping that is the case. But currently our intent is that masks would be optional for students and
Anybody.
staff.
Yep.
Anybody
That's what I'll
could choose to do that.
Definitely.
So, but again, we will be in touch with, keeping in touch with the Ohio Department of Health and the Greene County Public Health, and making sure that we follow any of their guidance. If anything changes, and things do change, we would certainly be compliant with that process. So. And Carlos Rivera.
I actually made, I'm trying to make all copies for everyone here, and the people that wanted some had a printer situation. So I was only able to make 3 copies of those articles. I want to thank Mr. Price and Mr. Kinsey for their comments, but it actually caused me to change exactly my comments, but I'm happy to. Reason I came here is actually 2 things that really concern me. One, I read several months ago, at least a couple of months ago, and one happened recently. The one that happened several months ago, there is a University of Wisconsin at Oshkosh professor named James Pesto, and he did an 11-year survey. And in that survey, he asked a lot of incoming students. So we're talking about college students. We're not even talking about high school students, college students. Mm-hmm. He asked incoming students several questions. One of the questions that he asked was, could they name a country outside of the United States where slavery occurred? And consistently through the 11-year period, 60 to 70% couldn't. And most of those ones that couldn't believed that slavery was an American invention. Okay? So my point on the CRT part of it is it is being taught in a way, because it's been a focus on only American sin. And in fact, he said that recently when he tries to teach them, well, no, actually, slavery is a human sin that occurred in every corner of the world, going back centuries and centuries upon centuries. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you go back to our DNA, we were all probably at one time either slave owners or slave holders or both. I mean, or slaves or slave owners or holders. That was the first reason that I wanted to discuss, is that I think this is happening already, that students are not given the context of the time. You mentioned the 1619 project, which has been about as debunked as you can be. They're being taught this, and those are some of the same students that you see burning flags, starting fires, looting, all these other things, because they're either college students or just out of college. That needs to be addressed. One of the other things I want to talk about was the NEA this week approved not only the adoption of CRT, the teaching of CRT. Okay, and they even said that they would fight any community, like a parent group or whatever, that did not want it discussed. I am the first generation of my family born in this country. My parents both sides came from Cuba, going back generations. My family literally lost everything to far left extremism. Okay, this is a political ideology, is what CRT is. The only thing they've changed is, instead of the proletariat and the bourgeoisie, it's now the oppressed and the oppressors, which you mentioned. And all you have to do to be an oppressor is have certain pigmentation. That's something that's really, really concerning, because that's exactly what my parents saw in Cuba, is that type of indoctrination of children against everything else that existed in their country. Okay, Cuba changed everything. It changed, the only thing it didn't change was the flag, but it changed everything else, took away private land. My family literally was able to come here, and they were the lucky ones because they were able to escape. My stepfather was a political prisoner in Cuba. So you can imagine when I start hearing that type of ideology being promoted, and the NEA, like I said, they said that not only would they teach it, that they would fight parent groups that wouldn't want it. That's concerning. And I know we have several teachers here. Those things, that's the type. I came to Bellbrook in 2008. I'm going to die in Bellbrook because I love it here. Okay? My name's Carlos. Everybody knows that's not an American name. Anybody that asks, I told them to be Cuban. I have not had a more welcoming feeling of peace and being at home that I've had my entire life here in Bellbrook. So while I think history should be taught, the context of history should be taught. And these kids, and the thing is, when you hear, and I'll be brief because I know I'm running out of time, or actually I'm probably out of time. The thing,
I don't have a clock.
Okay, the thing that concerned me about James Pestic, because people hear that, and they think, oh, well, college kids, what do they know? It's not that. If 60 to 70% of kids believe that slavery was an American invention, what do they think of our country? That it's inherently evil. Okay? And the idea of America is perfect. The people that have run America are imperfect. They're human beings. Mm-hmm. Every country has a history. Every country, there was slavery in Cuba, there was slavery, basically, as I said, every corner of the world had it. Now, is it still wrong? Is it still immoral? Absolutely, of course it is. But to sit there and say, this is inherently an American evil, you're teaching kids to hate their own country. Okay, when you talk about CRT, if you're white, you're an oppressor without any qualifier. In fact, it says inherently every white person is either consciously or subconsciously racist. Okay, someone that's a white person in Appalachia, he's an oppressor, but somebody who's wealthy of color, a Cuban person, let's say, oh no, they're oppressed. That to me is, and it's being pushed as fact in a lot of places, and that's how you end up with students believing that when they go into college. And he said they became increasingly belligerent towards him when he started explaining, no, slavery existed everywhere. They started, oh no, you're just saying that to cover up for America, and it's like, and they really were completely ignorant of any other facts of where it existed. Mm-hmm. So that's my 2 cents. I do not want that taught to our children. And I'm not even saying teach my political ideology. I'm saying keep politics out of it, and that is an ideology. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. I believe I've gotten everybody who signed in. Anybody who signed in and I didn't ask to speak? Okay. All right. thank you all very much. We greatly appreciate your willingness to step forward and speak, or to write and share your thoughts with us. It's awesome that we're getting input from the community. There's been a lot of board meetings that I have been to when, it's practically just Mrs. Chad who's, sitting in the audience. So it's great to have more of that and having the community participate. All right. Next item on our agenda is executive session for the purpose of preparing for, conducting, and reviewing negotiation sessions with public employees concerning their compensation or other terms and conditions of their employment per revised code 121.22 paragraph G4, and for the purpose of considering compensation of a licensed public employee per revised code 121.22 paragraph G1. Do we have a motion to do that?
So moved.
Mr. McKinsey,
Second.
Mrs. Sloughtman. Mr. Lyon, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Mrs. Sloughtman,
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter,
Yes.
Mr. Kinsey.
Yes.
Motion passes. We will go into an executive session. Where will we be?
My office.
Okay, we're going to go, rather than clear the room, you're welcome to stay. session as of 2 minutes ago, 3 minutes ago, whatever, how much time it took us to use the restroom. And then, so we are at superintendent's report for new business, 6A and 6B, including hand carry. And since we don't, and C and D for our consent agenda items. And since hand carry, or since this includes the hand carry items, Dr. Koza, would you bring those up?
So 6A9, this is an amendment, recommend approval amendment to motion number 21-107A3 to place Emily Murphy at BA 150 on the teacher salary scale. She was initially approved at BA. Also, additions, recommend acceptance of the following resignations. Principal Jill Adams of BCI effective July 2nd, 2021. And the resignation of elementary teacher Hannah Hartley effective July 1, 2021.
July 8th?
I'm sorry, July 8th, July 8th, 2021. And then 6B, support staff employment resignation leave of absence. Recommend approval of the following support staff 1-year employment contracts effective for the 21-22 school year. Mary Krebs, BC Special Needs Assistant, 6.5 hours a day, 189 days, step 0, classification 6. And then Jennifer McCarty, BC Special Needs Assistant, 6.5 hours a day, 189 days, step 4, classification 6. And then B3, recommend approve the following support staff substitute effective at the first semester of the 21-22 school year. Is Kelsey Bilbrey, Transportation Assistant and Certified Van Driver.
Okay. Board members, are there any of those items in 6A and 6B, C, or D that you wish to have us address individually?
Okay, are we just looking at the hand carry if we over here too?
No, with the whole
thing.
The whole thing. Anything?
Just a minute.
Okay.
I'm glad we're putting the pentathlon in the board games back. Okay.
All right. Anything that we want to bring out separately? No?
No.
Mr. Price, anything? Mr. McKinsey? All right. So do we have a motion to approve items 6A and 6B, 6C, and 6D, including the hand carry items? Do we have a motion?
Second.
No, do we have a motion? So you make the motion?
Yeah.
Mrs. Sloughman?
Second.
Mr. McKinsey for a second. Any questions or comments? All right, Mr. Liming, please call the roll.
Mrs. Sloughman,
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter,
Yes,
Mr. Kinsey,
Yes.
Mr. Price.
Yes.
motion passes. Okay, Dr. Kozad, to you for 6E.
Master Agreement, Sugar Creek Local Association of Support Personnel. Recommend approval of the negotiated master agreement between the Bellbrook-Sugarcreek Board of Education and the Sugar Creek Local Association of Support Staff for the period July 1, 2021 through June 30th, 2024.
We have a motion.
So moved.
Mr. McKinsey,
Second.
Mr. Price. Questions or comments?
Just to kind of give a high-level overview of percent raises. So in the first year, those folks were going to get a 3% raise, and then 2.5 the subsequent second and third years, and then also agreed to the same healthcare changes that SEA approved. So again, that's a part of that. Mr. Kinsey mentioned earlier in the meeting of that $4.3 million in projected savings for the healthcare changes. So it's kind of the high level overview. So that.
All right, any other questions or comments? All right, Mr. Liming, please call the roll.
Okay, Mr. Carpenter,
Yes.
Mr. Kinsey,
Yes.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
and Mrs. Sloughman.
Yes.
Motion passes. So down to items of information and discussion. Do you have any particular items unless you?
Yeah, I have a
that are
couple.
not listed?
Yes, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Okay, go ahead.
She's waited so patiently this whole time. I would like to introduce our new special ed supervisor, Bridget Pritchard. She comes to us from being a special ed supervisor over a few buildings in Dayton Public Schools. So she officially starts August 1, but she's already worked a little bit. So we welcome her, and she's going to do a fantastic job. It's going to be a great addition to our team. So we look forward to working with you, and it's going to be a good experience. We look forward to working with you. So welcome.
Great.
And waited so patiently through the whole
know.
meeting here.
We have a lot of patient people out here right now.
Yes.
Nice. We appreciate that too.
Also wanted to mention, I know traffic was mentioned earlier, especially specifically BCI. So one of the last things that actually Jill Adams was working on was, and with Jacob Wilhite, who was here earlier, was trying to change the BCI traffic pattern. So we actually are where the pickup of students, where the pickup and drop off, that loop, we are actually in that parking lot right there. We are moving all the buses over there. And then we are going to funnel the BCI parents on the exit or entrance between the high school and BCI. So they're going to go through the SEC parking lot and then loop around in front of kind of the BCI gym and then in front of the playground. So those kids are going to get into the cars right there. So we think that is going to move those cars off the street and into our parking lot, which we hope is a positive, because that's where the problems were, is all those cars were in the street. So we are moving them into the parking lot. And so we are putting the lines in on that to make sure the buses are where they need to be. So obviously that's going to be of the new BCI principal. One of the first things of getting that information out to those parents, that's going to be a big shift for them, and really something we've been looking at. And we were going to do that at some point in the school year. We just thought that was too big a shift in the second half of the school year to do that. So we hope that's going to either take care of or substantially reduce the traffic problems at BCI. So, and we're actually meeting with Stephanie Goff, who is the Greene County, I'm going to mess up her name, engineer, I believe.
Yeah.
So we are meeting with Jacob and Barry Tiffany, who's the Sugarcreek Township administrator, and myself are going to meet with her next week to talk about the traffic concerns and issues of hopefully, like maybe getting speed limits down or adding an extra lane in front of BCI. Or if there's something else.
It's all good. It's all good. Hey, just a thought. So you said they're going to start painting lines, and then if I heard you right, you're going to say we're going to see how it goes. And so I don't know what's involved with painting lines and stuff, but you might want to consider put some cones out there first and trying it, and then we go, yeah, we like it, now paint the lines. Otherwise, if you paint the lines, you go, this is worse than what we had before for whatever reason. I don't know how you cover up white lines on black asphalt. So it's just not a demand. It's just a creative suggestion. So
maybe I used too loose of words there. We are moving forward with that and not see how it goes, but we're confident it's going to be much better than what it is right now. All the buses fit over there, so Jacob Wilhite was a part of the conversation, and Mark Linkart, our head mechanic, to make sure all those buses can fit over there, and they can. We actually have a little bit more room also, so it's going to be a change for people.
I think it's great. Another thing I was saying is if for some reason something isn't exactly right and you've painted a bunch of lines and now you want to change something, I don't know if you go out there with black paint and paint over the white line.
Yeah, I mean,
Back
you put seal coating on.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
so be it. I'm just trying to.
It's going to be a drastic improvement over what's been going on. Those cars are off the street is the main piece to the whole.
Super.
Yeah. Okay. That's all I have.
All right. Anything else from board members?
A couple things here. I brought up at last board meeting about the potential of using the AAA school safety patrol. And as I understand it, Janessa's had some difficulty making contact with the coordinator for that. I remain intensely interested in that, as I think we can move forward and likely find a way to implement that safely in this community. I know you and I have talked, and it seems to fit better like within a neighborhood versus a situation where you're faced with highways like we are. So I respect that observation. But in the initial coordination discussion I had with the coordinator, she didn't go, "Oh, it doesn't work in a place like yours." She was like gung ho, and this has been implemented in some 150 schools across this Miami Valley, and so I have to believe would be a really good thing. And I have spoken to a parent that has a tremendously beneficial background in this area with traffic and law enforcement and things like that, and he is quite interested in supporting it from a organizational and let's get things together point of view. So I appreciate that. I'll leave him nameless in case he changed his mind on his
you can just get that name too.
Volunteerism.
Yeah.
But I'm very serious that we really need to seriously look at this, because it's like, well, there's this liability thing. What happens if some kid, and two of them get run over, or one of them makes a bad decision, and the result of that is some kid gets run over? Those are hypotheticals. It could happen, in the realm of possibility. I think our bigger risk is doing nothing and something happening, because I continue to be bothered by the speed by which people drive through our school areas, and what I believe is the inefficiency of our crosswalks and our lighting, but that is outside our control. It's outside of Stephanie Goff's control, even though she's very aware and very concerned and shares concern with us as the county engineer, but her hands are tied by national and state standards. And so I think we need to do what we can to be proactive. And the beauty of it too with this, for those of you that are working at School Safety Patrol, is that it actually gives these kids an incentive to be model students in school. It makes them feel like they've got some responsibility, and it helps them to mature and exert some leadership and things like that, which is really desirable. I remember when I was in school a long time ago. Yeah, it was a big deal when you got that flashy little belt and the badge, and you could go out there, and help kids, cross the street. So I see and you can use them for other things. They're identified, trustworthy, responsible kids that then you can help them usher people during a back to school night or whatever, pick one. So I really hope we would give really intense interest and focus on this and work towards implementing it. It doesn't necessarily have to be aligned with the beginning of the school year. So just because we just miss it by the 18th of August this year doesn't mean we wait till next year. Okay, sure. We do it halfway into the semester once we get organized. But I really would like to do something with that.
I'm following up with Mrs. Sigmund tomorrow.
It's wonderful. Yep. Thank you.
Yep.
That would be a badge of honor for some kids.
Indeed.
Too.
Yeah. Related to school safety and kids getting to school safely, I've mentioned and just frankly failed to follow up as I wanted to with respect to crosswalks on 725. There are like two, and there's a horde of kids that live on the south side of 725. So if we continue to not be able to offer busing to those kids, and parents are so motivated to walk their kids to school, it remains a hazard even for parents walking their kids to school there. It's not well lit. There aren't crosswalks, sufficient crosswalks. And so I really want to, I don't know whose responsibility that lies in, whether it's township or county or city. Melissa Dodd's left, right? Is the city manager?
She's done at the end of the month. I just
okay,
talked
good.
to them
Yeah. Okay, then I've got an opportunity to talk to her because she would be most cognizant of this, and she can hand me off to the right person within the
I got a feeling it might be Stephanie Goff.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll email both of them and see what kind of response I get out of it. But
and I can follow up with Melissa if you want me to,
Please.
do that, I can follow up with
Please.
Melissa. I know we've had that conversation in the past, probably 2 or 3 years ago, so I can definitely follow up with
I would really
Melissa if
appreciate
she's still
that.
around.
And so, with respect to busing, I thought Cassie did a really well-prepared statement tonight on need for busing. My position lies in that I'm very supportive of that. It's just, is there a community, clear message from the community that that's needed? And it wasn't helpful with the last survey that so few people indicated interest in using busing next year that are currently in the exclusion zone. So I'm quite supportive of it. I thought her recommendation was sound. I think unfortunately we are confronted with the reality of manpower right now, woman power, we're going to call it, with respect to drivers in the fall. And so, but she had a pretty keen observation that we could do a better job of advertising, perhaps. And so, so I think trying to get this full-scale busing, set up by the 18th of August this year is probably not in the realm of practical. I liked her suggestion of focusing potentially on the second semester, because some people still will remain working from home for a few months yet, especially people that work at the base. There's a lot of flexibility with respect to working from home. And so I think, if we can, over the next few months, once school gets settled in and we get a better feel for what level of capacity our buses are actually being used this year, things like that, I think it'll inform our decision. It gives us better time, more time to make a better decision on it. But I would suggest working with Cassie because she's got a passion for this. She's a master's, has a master's in physics. She can take data and really, pick it apart and make it useful. And so I would recommend that we find a way to use her. She's got a connection with the community, and I would really like to be responsive because her point is valid. We've gone from an unimaginably difficult financial situation to now a level of surplus that can let us look at bringing services and opportunities back for our children. So, that's my thoughts on that. With respect to potentially bringing things back, I know at some point a parent, I'd seen an email, they asked for, in fact, I've seen more than a few emails about art, concerns with art for K through 5, is it? And I know at one point there was an email, I believe Dr. Costa had sent to you where someone said, okay, if you can't bring back full-blown art teacher, can we somehow combine that with STEM? And they called it creatively STEAM, I don't know if you have a artsy engineering kind of person around or not, perhaps not, but I don't know the methodology by which we can discuss, and I know we're already late to need for any type of hiring or anything like that, but again, community, we need to hear from you. If you want something restored, it can't just be one email to one board member or some passing conversation at DOTS. It needs to be understood by the administration, by the board, that these things are important to you and you want to see them restored. And again, I think art is probably not an insignificant interest for many people, parents. So let's give some thought to that. I don't know, how do we move forward? How would we measure or put a metric on interest of restoration? I know you did it with the survey.
Well, I mean, the STEAM piece, I think that would be a real challenge to add anything additionally as I fully think through that whole situation, adding anything else to that curriculum, because right now they only get, 2 quarters a semester per year. So I think maybe the option to be explored is there an arts kind of program or that can be maybe brought into the school, and maybe it's a project. I know, Muse Machine does things, not necessarily art, but Muse Machine, artist residence, those kind of things where it's kind of an art project that's tied to the standards, and maybe it's something like that, especially this year where we can then further assess the situation. But at least kids would be getting something. And again, there's a cost to that, so maybe we could look to BSEF for that. Or if there's some other thing out there that we can explore. So that's kind of the thought process of exploring and looking into. There's not been anything fully explored on that at this point, but that's kind of where we're at with adding anything art-wise back right now.
I mean, a combination of the passage of the levy and then the initially unexpected benefit of the healthcare savings that we're going to have with the new contract, obviously it gives us a financial way forward that we didn't have before. So I would ask that we continue to consider the request and interest of our parents, but also realize we can't do it like that either. I understand that, and perspective. Lastly, just kind of come back to a little bit on the discussion we had earlier. I just want to make it really clear that I think the sense from the board tonight, if you listen, I think there is universal and without question support for diversity and inclusion in our school system. And that I thought some of the, like Denise Moore had some really excellent observations with respect to, as a survey across our website and our evident policies and strategies and whatnot, that it's, you know, it's not good that those things are missing. So I am, personally, I think, and again, I think it's pretty universal across the, in fact, it is universal across the board here, that there is absolutely, because we all were signatories and approvers of the letter that went out last year in June of 2020, I guess it was. And so, but obviously, as Dr. Kozad said, between COVID and serious financial distress, which consumed a lot of our time, scratching our heads, what if this, what if that, and now we've got the ability to come together and address what I will readily admit is a keen interest across not only this community, but of course the country itself. But I would like to make the differentiation, though, between that and my comments earlier on 322, House Bills 322 and 329. I see those as different issues. And so it may sound in some respect, it's contradictory, but it's not. I want our kids to be given full gamut of education. I want them to know any and all facts related to our nation's history. I want them to feel free to discuss those to their fullest extent. And I want us to have a diverse, inclusive school and community here as well. But there are elements of things that are moving across our country that I think are not desirable. They are more divisive than they are helpful. And hence, that's how I have the position on that personally for 322 and 329. But I'm fully embracive of our need to do better in the diversity inclusion realm. So I just want to make sure everybody understands that.
Great. Anything else? All right, do we have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Mr. McKenzie.
Second.
Mrs. Sloughman. Any reason to debate that? Okay. Let's call the roll, please.
Okay, Mr. Kinsey?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mrs. Sloughman?
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter?
Yes.
9:24.
Motion passes. And I'm sorry.
Gosh, it's early.
That's okay.
I was going to.
We had 10